Untold Intimacies. I'll start again. Kelly, what are you doing? A History of Sex Work in Aotearoa, 1978 to 2008 by Dr. Cheryl Ware is a compelling history and social analysis that explores the transformation of sex work in New Zealand over 30 pivotal years, drawing on in-depth interviews with sex workers from a variety of settings, street, escort, brothel and maritime. The book charts the arc from the Massage Parlors Act of 1978 through to the 2003 discriminalisation of sex work, right through to 2008's National Review. It offers a front row view of how people living this work faced police scrutiny, violence, health risks, and of course stigma, and how they mobilised to change the legal landscape. The author is Cheryl Ware, and it's a pleasure to say good afternoon. Hello, Cheryl.
Kia ora. Thank you for having me.
Do you know what's exciting? Today's the day, isn't it, that the book drops?
It is. It is the day, yes. Available in bookstores and online today. So very, very excited.
Very good. Now, I want to say, firstly, I have to be transparent and apologise as I'd not managed to finish the book before this interview.
No worries.
It got to me a bit late, and whilst I am a fast reader, I haven't been able to get there, but I will continue to finish it because I'm really enjoying it, and I still wanted to talk to you about your wonderful book. So,
thank you very much.
Firstly, Cheryl, what made you want to do this book? What does it mean to you?
I have always been interested in the histories of gender and sexuality. I did my PhD over in Sydney that involved interviewing gay men living with HIV, and some of them talked about working in the sex industry and navigating that space amidst all of these changes. You had then this was gay men, so you had decriminalisation of sex between men, but hugely you had the HIV and AIDS epidemic and the emergence of what we understand as safe sex or protected sex, and so the rise of condoms and everything like that. When I came back to New Zealand, I was really interested in exploring that history a little bit more and seeing how that affected the lives of those living in Aotearoa. So,
I mean, this is a part of our history, isn't it, that we don't often hear about. What do you think that is?
That is a great question. There's a lot of research out there by a lot of sex worker-led research, which is really, really amazing. There's so many people working both within the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective and also, I guess that's kind of, we've seen a rise of that more. Will Hanson's thesis on trans histories. We've got Karen Wilton's book, and I drew on some of her interviews. For this, Lindsay Armstrong has done a lot of work. So within some spaces, you hear a lot about it. It's a really popular academic field. There's a lot of people doing work, but maybe you don't always hear about the kind of nuances there in the more public space.
Yeah. You know what I really do like about this is that it's a mix of personal stories, which I loved reading, history and, of course, politics. Was that important to you that this book was led by the voices, first and foremost, of the sex workers themselves?
Absolutely. That was, as an oral historian, so that's something, oral histories, we focus on the voices of individuals. That is, for me, as a writer, that's the non-negotiable part. Everything else can be changed a bit, but the voices of individuals, and the key thing is this is a really critical history that's only accessible through the voices of those who lived through that period. And we're really fortunate, especially I felt really, really grateful in this book that people were willing to speak to me about this time and not giving a glossy history of it, but really getting into the positives and the negatives as well, and the challenges.
Yeah, and with that you've shared 25. I think it was 25, isn't it? Sex workers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Feature in your book. How did you find them, and how willing were they to share their stories?
Yeah, absolutely. It really came through word of mouth. A lot of that was word of mouth. I'm really grateful I had the support of the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective, some of whom featured in the book and also introduced me to their networks. I did oral histories for the what was then New Zealand AIDS Foundation, now Burnout Foundation Aotearoa. So I'd also met some people who'd been involved in these spaces. And there was a lot of openness, a lot of willingness. Some people got in touch with me via social media. I posted on what was then Twitter, now X. And that was also a great way because people were advertising their services on social media. And so it kind of my advertisement for this project came up in there as well, and saying that if people weren't willing, there might have been people who really saw that I wasn't part of the sex worker community and didn't want to speak to me, and that's completely valid. But they didn't get in touch. So obviously you're not going to get in touch if you don't want an interview.
But did you find, I mean, was there, I don't know, but I would have thought some of them, depending on how far back you went or when they would, that was part of their life, was it quite good to bring it back up, talk about it again? Did it, did you feel that they kind of went, oh my God, I'm going to talk about this again. This is what I did.
I think so. I really think so. And there are some who have, of course, been, and that's what I really, really enjoyed about the interviews. I was able to speak to some people who worked in the sex industry 20 years ago for 6 months. Yeah. Someone else dipped in and out for several weeks at a time and then out. And then there were others who had been working and are still working in the sex industry going on 3 decades. And there was a lot of they look back really fondly, especially on the 1980s as a time when money was more free-flowing. There was really a sense, especially for street-based workers, a sense of gravitating towards the street as a place where you could find your community. Yeah. And so there are a lot of really beautiful stories that came out of those discussions.
So on that, you mentioned the 80s. You covered the years 1978 to 2008. Why did you pick those decades or those years?
So 1978 was, I've always been interested in 1980s, 1990s because my research previously was led by interest in HIV and AIDS. However, 1978 was the introduction of the Massage Parlors Act, as you mentioned, and that meant that massage parlors were essentially defined as public spaces, meaning that police can enter them without a warrant and masquerade as clients and then return and arrest the worker if they had, and if they agreed to extras, if they so sexual services, if they had solicited, or allegedly sometimes even if they had not, but simply by working in a parlor. The 2008 moment, I was thinking of 2003 with decriminalisation, but yes, I thought moving it 5 years after, working it up until the law, until the legally mandated review of decriminalisation would be a really nice way to kind of capture the immediate aftermath of the law. And I'm really glad I did, because that brought out some stories that I tease out in the final chapter on Reflections of Work, where people talk about the law changing, but social attitudes take it that bit longer.
Yes, well, I haven't got up to that yet, Cheryl, but I'm getting there. No worries. So with the evolution of sex workers in New Zealand and law changes, do you think there is still a lot of stigma around sex work?
I think that one of the things that came across was that there are so many skills involved in sex work, and I think it's because of the moral attitudes around sex, around money, around that relationship, mean that sex work has had the spotlight on it in a way in other industries. And so sex work activists are fighting for the repeal of Section 19, meaning that would enable you to work in the industry on a migrant visa, on a temporary visa. And also getting it protected under the Human Rights Act, so that having been a sex worker doesn't mean won't impact your chances of getting a job. But of course, in the news, you also see these stories of people being declined mortgages because of their work in the sex industry.
Ridiculous.
Because it's seen as I'm not sure. I'm not on that side of the bank, so I'm not sure what their reasoning is there. Absolutely. And so there's still that thing, and not being able to list sex worker on your CV, even though there's the customer service skills, there's all of those people skills that are involved in that there's the money management skills, there's the
Yeah.
advertising. And so absolutely, it does
I
still,
mean,
there are still those challenges.
there are still that. Cheryl, you just reminded me. I mean, I've interviewed a really amazing lady. Her and a friend started up a company online that sells sex toys.
Yeah.
And they struggled to get a bank that would let them open a business account.
Mm.
And she's like, "My God, this is we're not selling bombs to
Yeah.
other countries. We are." And she said they went through pretty much all the banks, and then one of them moved to Australia, and they got an Australian. Well, they're Australian banks here, but they had to, and same with insurance. And this is 2020. They opened it 2023.
Yeah.
And banks aren't. When were they our moral compass? But anyway, I digress,
Oh,
Cheryl.
no, absolutely.
Yeah,
You don't. That's such a valid point. Absolutely.
Stupid. And doing this book, Cheryl, was there anything that surprised you